that?
Put your hands like this for me real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
What's going on, sir?
I'll explain that in a second, okay?
Okay.
She looks like someone's grandmother. 70 years old, silver hair, pulled over on a quiet Illinois street because she forgot to use her turn signal. The deputy tells her she's on her way to get her oil changed. She's worried about leaving her sick husband home alone. The deputy runs her license. He comes back to the window, and then he asks her to step out of the car. "What's going on?" she asks. "I'll explain that in a second." The handcuffs click into place. The deputy tells her there's a warrant out of Kenosha County, Wisconsin, first-degree intentional homicide, party to a crime. For a moment, she just stares at him. 22 years. That's how long investigators had waited to put those handcuffs on her. It hadn't come with a SWAT team or floodlights. It hadn't come after a dramatic confession or a last-minute fingerprint match. It came on a Tuesday morning on a routine oil change run because she forgot to signal a turn. Before this video is over, you are going to hear the single sentence that unraveled everything, something Roxanna said on the night of the murder, hours before investigators had released a single piece of information to the public. One word she should never have known. Stay with me. The case. The victim was David Vandery, 50 years old, United States Navy veteran, a man who had, by all accounts, every reason to believe his life was going well. He had just gotten married. 60 days earlier, David had wed Roxanna, the same woman now sitting in the back of a squad car in handcuffs. He had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. He had no reason to think that the life he was building was already scheduled to end. On the night of September 22, 2003, someone entered the home David shared with Roxanna in the quiet town of Randall, Wisconsin. The streets were dark. Most of the neighborhood was already asleep. By morning, David Vandery was dead. The crime scene. There are murders that look like accidents. There are murders that look like robberies. And then there are murders that look like exactly what they are. This was the third kind. 5 shots, every one of them fired into the back of David Vandery, the head, at close range. Whoever pulled that trigger wasn't trying to scare him. They weren't sending a warning. They weren't reacting in a moment of panic or rage. They were making sure he never got back up. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle. Nothing had been taken. No broken window, no kicked-in door, no ransacked drawers. Someone had walked into that house with a single purpose, carried it out, and left. When investigators arrived, Roxanna told them a story about an intruder, a mysterious stranger who had somehow slipped inside. It was vague on details, thin on logic, but in the chaos of a fresh crime scene, thin stories sometimes survive long enough to matter. Their neighbor also came forward, John Viscosil, friendly, trusted, a fixture in the neighborhood for years, told police he had been out fishing all night. He had a minor accident, he explained, fell into the water. That's why his clothes were soaking wet and saturated with bleach when he returned home. In 2003, neither story could be immediately disproven, and so both of them walked free. David Vandery's murder became a file in a cabinet, and the years began to pass. The evidence that should have ended it. Here is the thing about that night that investigators never forgot. In the hours immediately following the murder, before the scene had been fully processed, before forensic teams had finished their work, before any official information about the cause of death had been released to anyone outside that house, Roxanna Collins told her neighbors that David had been shot. Not that something terrible had happened, not that there had been an accident, not that she had come home to find him on the floor. She told them he had been shot. That is not a detail a grieving widow accidentally reveals. That is not something you say unless you already know it, because you were there, because you did it, or because someone had told you exactly what to expect before you ever called 911. Investigators noticed. They filed it, and for 22 years, that single word sat in the record, waiting for the moment it would finally mean something.
22 years. The hardest thing to explain about cold cases is not why they go unsolved. It's why they stay that way. Time is a powerful thing. Witnesses move, memories soften. The urgency that surrounds a fresh murder slowly gives way to other crimes, other cases, other priorities. The people responsible for what happened learn to live with what they did. The routine of ordinary life settles over everything like sediment, burying the past under layer after layer of normal days. Roxanna and John continued their lives in Illinois. Neighbors, friends, two people who had, apparently, nothing unusual between them. A detective picked up the file in 2012. He read every statement. He re-interviewed witnesses. He sat with the evidence and looked at the shape of things. And what he saw was a picture with only one explanation. He worked the case for over a decade. Because some lies, no matter how long they hold, are structurally unsound. They require everyone who heard them to keep believing them, keep repeating them, keep protecting them. And all it takes is one moment of exhaustion or guilt or fear for the whole structure to begin to shift. That moment came. The crack. John Viscosil's entire alibi rested on one story: the midnight fishing trip, the accidental fall, the reason his clothes were soaked and saturated with bleach when he came home on the night of the murder. His ex-girlfriend had backed that story in 2003. When investigators found her again, years later, enough time having passed that the calculation had changed, she told them the truth. The fishing trip never happened. It was a fabrication, a story constructed to explain away wet, bleached clothes that had no innocent explanation. John Viscosil had not been on the water that night. And then, investigators pulled the phone records, a sustained pattern of calls between Roxanna and John on the day of the murder, calls that told a story no alibi could contain. The random intruder story did not weaken under this scrutiny. It ceased to exist. The motive reveal. As the evidence accumulated, investigators began to uncover a relationship they believed explained everything. A relationship that had been hidden for years. A relationship that David Vandery either never knew about or discovered far too late. The picture that emerged was of two people who had made a decision together. Not a crime of passion, not an accident, a plan, for which David Vandery had been chosen as the obstacle to be removed. He was 50 years old. He had served his country. He had, in the last 2 months of his life, finally gotten married. And 60 days after his wedding, someone walked into his home and made sure he would never see day 61.
The interrogation. When the detective finally sat down beside Roxanna in the back of that squad car, he did not ease into it. He looked at her and said, "It's time." 22 years. A judge had reviewed the evidence and agreed there was probable cause for first-degree intentional homicide. This was not a fishing expedition. This was the end of something that had been a long time coming. He was direct about her situation. She was 70 years old. Her husband was sick at home. Prosecutors were aware of those facts. He had spoken personally with the DA, not an assistant, the DA. And there were mitigating circumstances that could still matter, but only if she gave them something to work with. The first person to talk, he told her plainly, would receive significant consideration. He had hoped, he said, that after their conversation a few weeks ago earlier, she would have called him. She hadn't called, so here they were. You know damn well what happened, and there is no other theory to this case. There is no other explanation for what happened to David. Roxanna's response never wavered. She didn't know anything. She really didn't. She wanted to speak to her lawyer. Down the street, John Viscosil answered his door to find detectives waiting. He listened calmly, asked if he could change into jeans before they left, acknowledged it was an ugly situation, and then said, quietly, that he'd rather just call his lawyer. 2 people, 22 years, not a single word. The Reckoning. Roxanna Collins was released in June 2025 after posting a $500,000 cash bond. John Viscosil remained in Kenosha County Jail, unable to meet that figure. In August 2025, defense attorneys argued before a court commissioner that the state's case rested on nothing more than old gossip and speculation. The commissioner reviewed the evidence and disagreed. Both defendants were bound over for trial. As of 2026, no verdict has been reached. If convicted, both face a mandatory sentence of life in prison. They are 70 years old. Whatever years they have remaining may be spent inside a cell for something that happened on a September night more than 2 decades ago in a quiet Wisconsin town where nothing much ever happened. David Vandery was 50 years old when he died. He had been married for 60 days. He waited 22 years for an answer. And somewhere in a courtroom in Wisconsin, that answer is finally being heard. There are more stories like this one that the world hasn't heard yet. Subscribe, and you'll be there when they come out.